Good morning. No, it's a very real pleasure to connect once again with my friends in the UUFDC. I do have to admit that I missed the lovely trips up there in the fall with the colors and stuff, but I'm happy to be talking to you this morning. For those who don't know, my name is Tonen O'Connor. I'm the resident priest emerita at the Milwaukee Zen Center. This means that I handle certain things, the prison, some of our prison work. I do a Tuesday evening Dharma talk and so on, but I'm not the full-time resident priest there anymore. Now, it's almost redundant for me to try to tell you that these are dark times. We know it in our bones. The very worst of human behavior, rooted in lies and delusion, is on exhibition for the whole world to see. Scenes, we thought happened only in other places, places that we somewhat smugly labeled third world countries, are now on our doorstep. Violence stalks our land, waving the American flag. A flag that once symbolized freedom has become the banner of violent attempts to reject the will of the majority as expressed in free elections. Well, it is in dark times like these that I think we can become desperate for light. And so I'd like to share with you something from Buddhist teachings that I hope may be helpful. Eihei Dogen, who founded my Soto Zen Buddhist tradition in 13th century Japan, wrote a very famous endorsement of Zazen, which is our word for meditation. And in it, he claimed that it was a practice useful to absolutely everyone. And this treatise, called in Japanese Fukan Zazengi, is chanted daily in Soto Zen temples. And I think for beginners on this way, it's one of the very first things we study. And it contains a very well-known passage, a sentence that asked us, and I'm going to quote here, to cease from practice based on intellectual understanding, pursuing words and following after speech, and learn the backward step that turns your light inward to illuminate the self. Illuminate the self. Now, on the face of it, this is good advice. It's something I think that we're tempted to think of as what we call, seeking self-knowledge. But in Buddhist terms, when we do illuminate ourself, we discover its transiency, its ephemeral nature that alters from moment to moment. We learn to stop clinging to something that has no fixed existence. We sometimes say it's empty. So nevertheless, even given that, even for a Buddhist, I think that there is a little danger that this sentence from Fukan Zazengi offers us. It may lead to self-absorption, to worry about myself, about me, or a temptation to shut out the outside world and live within my own little personal cocoon. Now, fortunately, as the Buddha taught, everything changes. Everything is impermanent. And recent scholarship has rejected this translation. They're saying that it's actually not true to the original language. Known in Japanese, this phrase that we're going to talk about is called eko hensho. And this term says nothing at all about the self. I'd like you to listen to a very radical difference in meaning as I now quote a translation by Professor Carl Bielefeld of Stanford University. Here's how he translates it. Therefore, stop the intellectual practice of investigating words and chasing after talk. Study the backward step of turning the light and shining it back. Very interesting. And here's another translation, contemporary translation, by Shohaku Okumura Roshi, who is a much respected Dogen scholar. And he says, it just says, turn the light and return the illumination. Simply give back the light. Now, this process is described by Okumura Roshi in a metaphor that I like very much. He says it resembles what happens when the sun sets behind the mountain behind us. And of course, it's dark. But across the way, the eastern mountains brilliantly reflect that light to us. It's even from my apartment here in Bayview in Milwaukee, I can enjoy a very warm glow of twilight that remains, that illuminates my world long after the sun has set over there. There is the phrase Eko Hensho also sometimes is understood to mean, actually there are three meanings, but I'm going to give you only the first two. What we call, anyway, Eko Hensho can mean what we call getting a second wind. We feel exhausted, our energy is gone, and yet it reappears and we continue to move forward. So Eko Hensho is about the reappearance, the return, and the outward activity of light or energy. And these two understandings of shining back the light and of getting a second wind are what I was referring to when I called this little talk, Return the Illumination. Our lives have been illuminated by many kindnesses, many generous acts over the years. And this illumination does not disappear. I will very long remember the young woman who stopped her car in the middle of the street and leaped out to ask me if I needed help shoveling. I didn't know her from Adam, but there she was offering a kindness, and I won't forget it. We can tap into this kindness, I think, gain a second wind and return it so that it shines into the darkness of these ugly times. We are, in a certain sense, repaying our debt to the countless people and circumstances that have supported our lives in both very large and very small ways. Dark times are difficult, of course, but strangely enough, they offer an opportunity to return the illumination for the benefit of others who seek light in this darkness. And interestingly enough, turning the light outward for the benefit of those around us is actually a very, very good way of preventing the darkness from invading us and paralyzing us. As we illuminate outward, we're not sucking in despair. And please understand me, I want to be clear here that I'm not talking about how embracing some sort of Pollyanna-ish optimism, that everything's lovely, but rather I think I'm talking about simply learning to push back against the darkness that threatens to envelop us, learning to push back and act against it. So how do we return the illumination? What does that really mean? Well, I think we return it in the same way it came to us, in small acts of kindness. These small acts of helping one another, of seeing need and responding, are a statement of our solidarity with each other. I will not, that young woman who stopped to help me shovel gave me light. And as I went back up the steps to return the shovel, I noticed that my neighbor had received a package sitting out where it might get wet. So I just took it inside, returned the light, and left it at her back door. It's very simple. It's neither rocket science nor deep philosophy, but it is an expression of our awakeness, our awareness of the little needs that we can answer. You know, sometimes we feel frustrated because we can't get at the big stuff. We don't know how to stop certain things. But we can always encourage things, both small and large. So you remember, or at least as a Buddhist, my faith rests in the fact that we are inextricably connected. And therefore, every helpful act weighs in the scales against the ugliness. I recently gave a talk on kindness to the weekly Buddhist discussion group that I lead, on Zoom, of course. And I think I'll close with a quote that one of our members brought into the discussion. And here is what it is, because I think it's a pragmatic, useful way of returning the illumination. And here's the quote: "Unexpected kindness is the most powerful, least costly, and most underrated agent of human change." So let's do what we can to illuminate positive change. Not being overly sentimental, being practical, but not deciding that we need to just retreat inside ourselves. Determined that we will return the illumination. So thank you for listening. That's all I have to say, except that please take care of yourselves. Be good to yourself and all those you know.